Roll Tide, everybody. Talking to you live right now on Cover Crimson with Clint Lamb. I'm Mick Gillispie, Alabama, with a scrimmage and a lot to talk about it. We're going to get into that and more right here on the show. How about a 5-star recruit? Little momentum for the Crimson Tide. Like, subscribe, thumbs up. We're brought to you by MyBookie.ag. Our promo code is Crimson, and it's going to be a fun show. I feel like we got a ton to get into. Oh, and by the way, it's a sweet show because tonight's the Sweet 16. Roll Tide. He's Clint Lamb. I'm Mick Gillispie. Let's start with the 5-star commitment to Alabama yesterday. Their 4th recruit, Jorden Edmonds from Georgia. Big get.
Big get, yeah. From a size perspective, close to 6'3", listed 175 pounds, but I think he's north of 180 now. So like a guy that continues to put on weight, but just I'm so impressed with the job that Mo Linguist has been doing as far as the secondary, Mick. And really, the ball was already rolling on that front. Now, granted, Nick Saban, when he chose to retire, obviously there was a ton of guys who ended up leaving, but some of the players that he had already recruited and had committed to Alabama, they were kind of coming in, but just their ability, the current staff's ability to build on that and, go and secure guys like Jorden Edmonds. I mean, just nothing short of spectacular. The cornerback room in particular, really, I guess it's more so the secondary in general. It's the safeties. Obviously, some of these guys are going to be playing Husky before it's all said and done. The perimeter corners, like across the board, they've done a phenomenal job of recruiting the secondary in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and he talked about that. Like in the press conference, and I thought that it was an area where for Alabama last year, remember they all fought, like just bolted to all of our enemies. And now, here we go.
What I love about they're recruiting at an extremely high level, and that's where it's got to start. But it's also like they're getting the right guys. Like if you think about it across the board, I mean, just look at some of the players that they've already kind of recruited. I have a list going on over at Cover Crimson because I just thought it was so impressive. But I mean, when you start going down the list, obviously you got 2 top 70 recruits in the 2026 cycle in Jorden Edmonds and Zion Gibson. Both of those guys are ranked as top 10 cornerbacks. In 2025, you had Dijon Lee, you had Chuck McDonald. Both of those were top 60 players. Dijon Lee being a 5-star, top 7 or 8 corners in the country. You had Cam Calhoun, who was one of the top transfer portal corners, top 100 transfer portal player. The year before that, you've got like Zay Mincy, you got Xavier Brown, you got Red Morgan, you got Dre Kirkpatrick. So they're recruiting at an extremely high level from the high school ranks and from the transfer portal. But then when they're getting them on campus, it's not like how many guys has Alabama brought in that hadn't really lived up to the billing? Dijon Lee, it's early, obviously, but I mean, he's obviously living up to his billing. Ivan Taylor, he's a guy that I think is going to contribute early. Cam Calhoun's doing great things. You look at what Zay Mincy did as a freshman as far as contributing at corner, then making the move to safety, ended up starting the bowl game against Michigan. You look at guys like Xavier Brown being a full-time starter, making an impact. Even the guys like Red Morgan and Drake Kirkpatrick, players who, weren't as highly rated, ranked outside the top 250. Drake Kirkpatrick was a 3-star, wasn't even ranked in the top 500 or 600 for that matter. And not only was Red Morgan kind of a first-year contributor and they like where he's trending, you also got Drake Kirkpatrick, who's doing some good things as well, and he's coming along. You bring in guys like Damani Jackson. He's exactly what you wanted him to be. You bring in Keon Sabb, exactly what you wanted him to be. So the impact players from the transfer portal. Bring in Deshaun Jones. He provides depth at both corner and at Husky last year. More than likely is going to be the starting Husky this year. Cam Howard has provided some depth. So what I love about this, Mick, is they're recruiting at an extremely high level. There is not really an issue as far as competition because of the way that they kind of handle things. You're going to get your opportunity to play if you're ready to play. That's the bottom line. But it's also, you're trusting the evaluations, you're trusting their ability to develop those players. You really couldn't be asking for anything more than what Mo Linguist, Kane Wommack, and the rest of that defensive staff is doing as far as the secondary is concerned.
Great comments from all you guys. And don't forget, we're also available on covercrimson.com. We get on there and talk about all this stuff, live threads during the game. So guy like Shane, he says he watches everything Clint puts on YouTube. Well, join Clint at Cover Crimson right now, and you can do it $25 off, covercrimson.com. That's the message board, and that's kind of like our homepage for our channel. But Shane, we appreciate it, and I thought Jimmy Stein did a great job too. By the way, I would love to have the old. What do you guys call your podcast? You and Jimmy?
The Bam on 3 show. Yeah, it was kind of.
Well, it wouldn't be the Bam on 3 show anymore.
It would not be the Bam on 3 show. No,
all of us worked there though.
Thanks, yeah, yeah. Isn't that funny? Bama Insider, I guess, when we were all 3 doing it together. Sure, there's some rights on that name.
Show. The one that I host is a different show. It was Monday Night Quarterback, and that was kind of like, you guys weren't on together. You guys had your own podcast.
We did, yeah.
You kind of just did the thing that you did here, and the audience definitely told us that they liked it. Not just Shane, which is pretty cool. So it was good to see. I like Jimmy. I call him the dean of Alabama football broadcasters.
Yeah, what I love about Jimmy, and just the reason I've always loved doing stuff with him, is I'm such a conversationalist where I have things that like I want to say, but then also like there's thoughts that maybe, need to be triggered. And just the way that he kind of operates and the way we feed off each other, a lot of times there's, we just feed off of each other's conversation. And I mean, I think the other day we spent like half an hour talking about just the quarterbacks. And I at least from my perspective, I don't know how others felt about it, but I never felt like the conversation got dull or repetitive. And so that's kind of me and him's talked. I mean, we could go for 6 straight hours and not even lose a beat, covering all the different things. But yeah, I certainly enjoyed having him on, and we might try to do something in the future and make that sort of a regular thing if that's something that people enjoy doing.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Guys, subscribe, by the way, to the channel. Hit the bell so you know when we go live. We pushed the show back about a half hour because we were kind of going through the press conference, and we just wanted to have that for today to hear what DeBoer said. Not just hear it, but to kind of digest it a little bit as well, so that we could come on and talk to you guys about this first scrimmage and, and the significant impact of that. And you had the first scrimmage, and he seemed to be pretty pleased with all 3 quarterbacks. He really didn't break any of the guys down. He was like, hey, a couple throws here, a couple throws there, but they made a lot of throws. So that's a good sign. He's not going to give us anything, I don't think, on that quarterback race right now.
No, I mean, why would he, right? I mean, the problem is a praise for one in a lot of ways is interpreted as a slight towards somebody else. I never understood that with the whole Jalen Milroe, Ty Simpson thing. It's like if Ty Simpson came in at the end of a game and you're like, man, he looked really good, for some reason people would take that as a slight towards Jalen, or vice versa. If you would go to the open practice and Jalen would make a really good throw and, hey, I think Jalen had a really good day, for some odd reason people would be combative or argumentative about it. When it comes to a guy that maybe they want to be the starter, there's just I think at a certain point you're going to see people, especially if they're asked specifically about a guy, they're gonna kind of go through it and you're going to hear what they have to say about it. But as far as kind of broad questions about a position like the quarterbacks, just don't expect them to kind of dive in and give you a detailed scouting report on how the scrimmage went regarding individual performances. But you're right. As far as no quarterback has really separated themselves, at least not significantly compared to how things started in the spring, or at least that's what Kalen DeBoer says.
Right.
I don't think he's going to, because the second you start saying a guy's separating, that can be interpreted a certain way. But I from everything that we've heard, all 3 guys are making plays, and they all have their mistakes. They're all working through some things. Keelan Russell's a freshman. Austin Mack is a guy who's never really had any sort of significant, meaningful playing time. The same can be said for Ty Simpson. I mean, he's obviously got several years in the system or in the program, so that helps him. But same situation where there's still growing pains with Ty Simpson. I guarantee you, he is not a finished product by any means. He's only going to continue to get better the further along he gets in this process, should he become Alabama's starting quarterback. But you got to feel good about where this position is at, because from what we've been hearing, guys, one of the things that I was told regarding the quarterbacks, and it's pretty broad, but you're seeing a lot of catchable balls being thrown. And I think Kalen DeBoer actually mentioned that today as well, but that's just a common theme that I've heard, where all of these quarterbacks throw catchable balls where the receivers can make plays after the catch. When you talk about the receiver room and kind of where it's trending, and we'll get into that, of course, I'm sure, but I think it's a really good combination, because this is a receiving room that can generate a lot of yardage after the catch.
Yeah, and I think that, like, kind of going there and talking about the wide receivers was the next thing on the docket. But what I wanted to tell you guys before we get there is that we're brought to you by MyBookie.ag, and you hang out with us. It's March Madness. Bama plays tonight against BYU. Auburn plays tomorrow. The SEC has a bunch of teams in this tournament. It's going to be a lot of fun to see how this thing rolls out. 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000 plus a $10 casino chip when using the code Crimson. That's right, MyBookie.ag, and we appreciate them for hanging out with us. All right, let's get into the depth in the wide receiver and cornerbacks room. You could sit here and talk about the wide receivers, and you're going to miss guys, which is crazy, right? Now, we've been here before. We feel really comfortable about the wide receiver room, and then we don't have like the four horsemen. We don't have the Ruggs and Waddle and Smitty and Judy. We think we do. Do we have something like this here? Because Ryan Williams is a superstar. Jeremy Bernard is very consistent. And I think both of those guys will be in the NFL. Jalen Hale, obviously, take the top off the defense guy. And then, you got a host of other guys that are making an impression. Latsier Brooks, his name's come up a whole lot. So, what do you think? Jalen Mbakwe, how's Bach doing?
Here's the thing about the wide receiver room. What Alabama had with the rideouts, 4 day one first-round draft picks, top 15 draft picks, you just don't see that. And, you're probably never going to see that again. You might end up having 2 in the same room. You can have what Washington had in this past cycle, draft cycle, where you had that top 10 pick in Rome Odunze, and then you got a couple of day 2 picks. I think when I look at Alabama's wide receiver room right now and the way that it's currently structured, I would say that's a lot more in line. Now, when you're talking about future, what is Latsier Brooks going to become? He could end up being a future first-round draft pick, and you can say he was in this wide receiver room. How big of a part of things, I don't know. But Kalen DeBoer, when he was asked about kind of things that were, position groups that have really come along, the first one that he mentioned was the wide receivers and how different it looks compared to a year ago. And I think that when you talk about the styles of receiver, the guys who can consistently create separation, like the scheme is going to help them. It's going to give them opportunities. It's going to, figure out ways to get them open kind of just through scheme. But also when you have that level or that combination of guys who can also be separators and do some of that on their own, that's where you get like the wide open guys, like the Devontae Smith in the national championship. That is a premier route runner who plays at an extremely high level, being meshed with one of the best play callers who was scheming to get him open consistently throughout that game. And you ended up seeing a 200-plus yard receiver in the first half. Like, that's just kind of, and I think Alabama's got that play caller, and I think they have some of those receivers who are capable of doing that. It's the level of depth in this room. I mean, I got a text from a source. I've already mentioned it, but Rico Scott is a guy we need to be talking about more. He's in a room full of guys, so you could probably argue that about. Another thing that I've been told is, the bottom of this wide receiver room would have probably been like middle of the pack last year, if it would have been trending. Because you got to think, like, Bubba Hampton was a true freshman last year. So, he's continuing to develop. Obviously he's dealing with an injury and stuff, but I'm saying, like, he continues to get better. Ryan Williams, the top of your wide receiver room, which I think it starts with him and Jeremy Bernard, they're now a year older. Like, Ryan Williams year 2 is not Ryan Williams year 1, where he's got that experience and he's continuing to hone his craft. He's been going against college corners for forever. So I just from top to bottom, not only is the ceiling of this group been elevated significantly compared to where it was a year ago, but I think the depth of this room, they really do feel like they could run bare minimum 7 or 8 deep out of the 10 guys they currently have in the room, and they feel like they could get quality, impactful reps at the wide receiver position. I mean, Jimmy, you really can't beat that, man.
No. It's exciting too. And then, we kind of got into this already, but DeBoer's talking about in the press conference, like one guy, that was in the defensive backs area, and you talked about this, and now all of a sudden you look around and then you even throw up the chart of all the superstars and the guys like Mustard that just show up and they look the part, and the recruiting, and then you go and get a 5-star for that position. So you mentioned the recruiting by Lindquist and what's going on there, the excitement. That to me was one of the biggest surprises of last year's team, that they did a lot better than I thought they were going to do. This year, they actually have some guys that have experience.
At what spot are you talking about now?
Like defensive back and cornerback, really.
Yeah. And that I thought you were. I didn't know if you were talking about the secondary in general or just specifically the cornerback.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have anybody. I mean, they got transfers and stuff, but the guy that stayed he didn't even play this year.
That's it's funny how that works, and once again, it just speaks volumes about the coaching staff's ability to identify the talent, secure the talent through recruiting, and then develop the talent. And it's really you reached a point where you've got a 5-star, one of the best athletes in all of college football, I promise you, in Jalen Mbakwe, who has now moved to the offensive side of the football to join a pretty loaded wide receiver room. And you're not looking at that as missing a beat at all in your cornerback room. That is absurd. He was cornerback 3. Well, I would say him and Deshaun Jones were, kind of combined to be cornerback 3 last year. But that would, for most, think about that at any other program. If you lose that guy to the transfer portal, which was almost a thing, or to the other side of the football, that is going to be a significant loss. And yet they're not really missing a beat. Cam Calhoun has stepped in flawlessly. He's doing some really good things. We've heard positive reviews all throughout the spring regarding his performance and just the tenacity that he plays with, the grittiness that he plays with. I think fans are going to love watching him play. Terrion Arnold was a lot that way. He was a very fun-loving guy off the field, but very gritty, very physical. You loved the style and the physicality in which he played with. Always was willing to mix it up against the run and in the screen game and do all those things. Cam Calhoun is certainly that way. Dijon Lee is really coming along strong. And you've got like reinforcements like Damani Jackson's not available this spring. Keon Sabb at safety is not available this spring. Chuck McDonald is not even on campus yet. He's a top 10 cornerback that they just recently signed, a top 100 recruit, very talented player in his own right, top 60 recruit actually, and he's not even on campus yet. So as good as it has been throughout the spring and how pleased they are with these positions, it's only going to get better once the summer hits and guys start getting back from injury and guys are finally arrive on campus. I mean, the wide receiver room and the cornerback room, really the secondary in general, we've praised it all off season, and it's nice to hear that what you think is turning into a pretty loaded group, it's actually coming to fruition on the field. And something else that Kalen DeBoer brought up in his press conference, the fact that they're going against each other every day in practice, like it's deep loaded groups. You start working your way down to like the threes, the guys who are working with the 2s and the 3s, the 2s and the 3s on the other side. You're not going against walk-ons. You're not going against guys, who really probably are never going to play for Alabama. You're going against high talent, effective players still. And I think that iron sharpening iron, phrase is something that very much applies to both the wide receiver room and the cornerback room and the secondary in general.
That'd be the practice that you'd want to see.
100%.
Those guys against your the offense, the wide receivers against those cornerbacks, be some really good battles there. I wonder who matches up against who. I mean, do they switch it? It'd be, you see like Ryan Williams, going up against Mustard. Let's see what happens there,
Well, what's crazy is like across the cornerback room, Cam Calhoun, he's like 6 foot, but here's the thing. And I want a lot of people get them confused, and sometimes I use them interchangeably. So I kind of understand it because I would say I do it too, even though I know the difference. height and length are two different things. You can have really good length and only be 6 foot. And so that's arm length. That's kind of what you're looking for. A guy like Cam Calhoun, he's not the tallest guy. He's not the biggest guy, but really good length, can really survive out there on that front. A guy like Dijon Lee, he's super tall. The length perspective, the arm length in comparison to that, I mean, I don't think he has like super long arms compared to, he's close to what feels like a 6'5" frame. But, you've got a lot of length in the secondary, or at corner in particular. And you've got a guy like Isaiah Horton, who's now come in. You've got Jalen Hill, who is kind of a lengthy guy who's going to be able to win downfield, do all that. But then you've also, what I like about it is you've got a wide receiver room that's got a wide variety of skill sets. So how that prepares you for fall Saturdays is there's really not a style of receiver that Alabama is going to see on a given Saturday that they have not seen in practice at some point. When you've got all kinds of different, you've got the crafty route runners, the pure slot guys who are able to create underneath, the vertical guys, the length, the size, you've got a combination of all of it. And so I really think from a corner perspective, you're really seeing them, they're going to be battle tested just through practice. And I absolutely love that. I love the way everything's starting to shape up here.
Guys, thanks for hanging out with us. Like and subscribe as you kick it with us here on the Cover Crimson YouTube channel. We're doing it live, and we appreciate you guys being here, all 190 of you. But if you guys give us thumbs up, I bet you it'll be 200 in the blink of an eye. That's how it works, the whole algorithm thing. But you like us doing the shows, and we love to talk to you guys in the comment section as well about Alabama football as we get closer to the 8A game or scrimmage or whatever you want to call it. But thank you for being here. And of course, we'll be over at covercrimson.com as well. All right. You love breaking down the offensive line. I mean, Mike Johnson, who's part of our channel too, loves it in a different way because he's an old offensive lineman. You just love trying to figure out what the combination is going to be. It's almost like you're trying to solve the Rubik's Cube.
Yeah. And what I would say is that it's probably my biggest concern, or one of my biggest concerns for Alabama right now. One of the other big concerns that we don't really talk about enough is the specialists, but Kalen DeBoer did mention today that the specialist did a good job. He mentioned Connor Talty. He hit all of his kicks, whether it be, PAT, whether it be field goals. And I have heard good things about him. I've heard that the staff really likes how he's progressing. He's a guy that's really gained a lot of confidence. I think him sitting for a couple of years, he's seen a lot of those pressure moments, hadn't really been in them himself yet. But, he's handled the kickoff stuff, so he's got, some experience on that front, but also he's seen those really high, intense moments. And, he hadn't had his confidence, shaken or anything like that up to this point because he hadn't really been asked to be the one to knock down some of those big kicks. But that was a position that I was concerned about or a phase of the football that I was concerned about. But the offensive line is one of the other big ones. But Kalen DeBoer from the scrimmage today, he brought up that he felt like it was one of, if not their best practices that he's seen from them. That is very encouraging. We talked about their ability to be more physical. They ran the football consistently. That's a huge aspect of this. Like everybody who wants to talk about the run game and how inconsistent it was last year. And yeah, that would even include like Jalen Milroe's legs. Like that was the biggest aspect of the offense, but it was very inconsistent. You had some games where you saw him go completely off. You saw some games where he was completely shut down, AKA Oklahoma. And it really stalled the offense. But I think through the traditional lens of running the football, they're starting to get a good feel. Like I think when you've got a bunch of read stuff where you really don't know where the football's going, it could end up being run off of you. It might not if it ends up being a quarterback keeper or a give or whatever. Your job is your job, and I get that. You just execute it. But I think being more downhill, as far as needing to turn around and hand the football off to your running backs, I think that's going to help the offensive line. From a pass protection standpoint, Kalen DeBoer talked about how they did a pretty good job of keeping the quarterbacks upright in this scrimmage. And, I do like right now, something to keep in mind is that the scheme is not really going to protect the offensive line at this point. Like they're not dialing up some, sort of trick plays and trying to throw the defense off and do all this or do all that. It's more of they're being asked to just do things that's going to make them better as a player once things get to fall and they actually start playing games, scheme, I think, is really going to help the offensive line. So if you're hearing positive growth and development as far as the pass protection and stuff like that, I think that's going to be magnified once it gets to the fall, because they're now going to have that scheme kind of aiding them, doing things that's going to kind of prevent the defense from being able to pin their ears back. And, they're going to give the offensive line a lot of time as far as play action and doing some of those more traditional things. All of that's really going to help them. And so while I am still concerned about the depth, I really like what I'm hearing as far as, Wilkin Formby is a guy who I've heard a couple of times who's doing some really good things. Will Sanders is a guy who's been brought up several times by players and obviously sources, because you go and you try to confirm some of this stuff. And I have heard from a couple of people that, Will Sanders is doing some really good things, and he could end up working his way into the mix at left guard. Don't be shocked if that ends up happening. But, that's what you want to hear at this point, because it's nothing that Gino Vandermark's doing wrong. It's nothing that Cam Dewberry's doing wrong. It's that Will Sanders is just he's developing. He's working extremely hard. And at the very least, you're hearing about depth developing. And through Caden Proctor not being available this spring, that's helping some of the other tackles get a lot more reps. Hopefully, Jackson Lloyd and Arco and Nugum, those guys can come along. And if they can get a third tackle that they can trust, and Wilkin Formby turns into who I think he's going to be, I really feel good about this offensive line group. It won't be able to withstand several injuries, especially at tackle, but it will be able to withstand an injury, especially if it's temporary. And I think that bodes well.
I love it when you talk offensive line, because I think that it's the most important group on the field every year, to be able to run the ball, to protect the quarterback, not to jump off sides, a bunch of penalties, got to be disciplined. And we've had, 2 Joe Moore award-winning teams under Saban on the offensive line. And then, of course, DeBoer had one when he was at Washington. But this has been an area to me since the 2020 season that has just digressed to the point where you're like, man, every year we have these high expectations about the offensive line. They're going to be road graders. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. And then it's the same thing, missing blocks and quarterbacks getting sacked. Now, part of that could be on the running backs not blocking, or the tight end not doing something, or the quarterback holding the football too long, So it'll definitely be a different look just based on the personnel, and the style that Alabama wants to work this year. Do you think that plays in at all?
Yeah, and it's like I said, I think, the way that Jalen Milroe won was not really set up in a way that was going to protect your offensive line a whole lot. Like, the way that he won as a passer, it's like, he needed time to kind of process things. He wasn't the fastest processor. He would hold on to the football a little bit too long. He wasn't really a rhythmic timing type of passer. And so it's like that kind of naturally puts your offensive line at a disadvantage. Now, I'm not making excuses for him. That it's something that you can very much overcome, but it is something where it's like, okay, based off of their own shortcomings at the time, I don't think it was the best combination. Through new offensive approaches, I think that's going to help the offensive line. I think development, the fact that I think, Parker Brailsford's going to be a lot more comfortable going into year 2 than he was in year 1. It was kind of a culture shock. He participated last spring, but we all know what was going on. Was not a full participant. Caden Proctor wasn't available last spring. He's also not available this spring, but you expect him being a 2-year starter at this point. He's only going to continue to get better. A guy like Jaden Roberts, I think at this point in his career, he kind of is who he is, but that's a good player. So that's no problem. Wilkin Formby, I think Wilkin, kind of continuing to go through what I would assume would be some growing pains. I don't think he's going to go from what we saw against USF to being a perfect offensive tackle. So don't be surprised if that ends up happening. But through those growing pains, I think they're going to come out the other side of this at some point in 2025, where you're getting way better, way more consistent play at right tackle than you did a year ago with Elijah Pritchett. Pritchett was, fine at times, but he was a complete liability in pass protection at times. And there were some issues as far as the consistency with the run blocking and all that stuff. I think Wilkin is positioned pretty well. And I think that the offensive line is going to be significantly better for a number of reasons than not only did you see a year ago, but really you've seen the last several years.
I like to hear that. I like to hear that. But you're losing Booker, your best offensive lineman, first round pick in the draft, and you think Alabama's going to be all right. Plus, you got the young guys too, right? I mean, and you're talking about some of them too, like, but like the Michael Carrolls. I mean, you expect some of these guys, Micah Dubose, just somebody you feel like is going to step up and do something.
Well, yeah, Florida went through some growing pains, but I think they were better at quarterback by the end of it. After losing Anthony Richardson, who was the number 4 pick in the draft, right? Sometimes you lose guys and you lose really talented guys and you end up being better for it. Now, from a leadership standpoint, it doesn't get better than Tyler Booker. And I do think Alabama will miss him. If I could snap my fingers and him be back in Tuscaloosa, I mean, I would be foolish not to do it. But what I will say is when you lose guys like that, you start trying to look at the positives and things that can benefit Alabama in the grand scheme of things. You know, it remains to be seen how much it will actually impact positively or negatively. But, you know, I would say one thing is from a schematic standpoint, he wasn't a great fit. He wasn't an ideal fit. He made it work. He's athletic enough for a guy his size where it wasn't terrible, but there were some times where they were asking him to pull and get out there in space and just he couldn't get there. You know, it just wasn't there, and it was leaving guys uncovered to kind of make tackles. It's like when you're calling stuff like that and you're really trying to put on a strain on defenses out there on the perimeter, if you can get guys blocked and kind of create a consistency on that front, you can loosen things up as far as the interior run, passing game, everything else. So I do think that whoever ends up starting at left guard in 2025, I think they'll be better suited for that. I mean, Cam Dewberry, I also think he's more Tyler Booker. He's not Tyler Booker though. Like I think he's a better mover overall. You know, so it remains to be seen. But even though they did lose a really talented dude, I still think across the board from left to right, because your offensive line, it's always about where are your weak spots. There were some damn good players on that 2021 offensive line. You know, you've talked about Evan Neal being one of your favorite players of all time. Hell of an offensive tackle for Alabama that can't really do anything when they can just look at your right tackle and say, that's the guy we're going to exploit. That's the guy we're going to. I mean, so the pressure is the pressure on every play. And even if you've got 4 of the 5 guys doing their job, if you've got one guy who's not, it's still pressure on the quarterback every play. You got to do a lot to compensate, take away. So it's like, you know, I think from a leakage issue, you won't see nearly as many problems as you have in recent years. They were definitely improved last season, but I think they'll be even better this year.
I like what I hear. All right, switch gears, guys. And remember, we can talk more football on covercrimson.com. Save $25 off the annual. I'm on there. Clint's on there. Stacy's on there. We got some other stuff going on. So be a part of that. The show's not over, so don't go anywhere. I'm just telling you. You want to keep talking about offensive linemen with Clint, you can do it right there. And he loves to talk about it. He'll go into the 4th string guy and what different places he can play on the line, right, Clint? But not now. We're going to talk about baseball and then basketball. You got to support this baseball team. If you guys are in Tuscaloosa this weekend, they're playing Oklahoma. These guys are out there and they're doing some things this year. They got a potential first-round pick as their shortstop. They are winning a bunch of games. They're 23-3. They beat Tennessee, the defending champs. And they got Oklahoma, top 10 team, number 9 team coming in Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So 6 o'clock Friday, noon on Saturday, 1 o'clock on Sunday. Rob Vaughn is earning our respect. This baseball team is too. And you got to make the Joe a home field advantage. So if you can go to the game, do that and you know, get out there and be a rager in right field or sit in the stands and have a good time. But again, I love to see this program kind of turning the corner. It's exciting, and they deserve our support.
How many games do you normally get to see in person? Do you go to a lot of baseball games?
Man, I used to broadcast them for a long, you know, with Chris Stewart on radio for a couple of years, and then on the TV. And
you're way down in South Alabama. So it's a hike.
Yeah, I mean, like if I would love to do it. I mean, I love Alabama baseball. You know, I'm from the Jim Wells days, but the program was in bad shape, and it's just really exciting to see them kind of turn the corner and become, a really tough team to beat. And that's all you can do. You're not going to win all your games in baseball, but just be a tough team to beat. So, so make sure that you guys check that out this weekend. And then tonight we've got, maybe in the next 20 minutes, you'll get to watch Elephant in the Room with Coker and me. We preview basketball. So, Clint, surprise, but we're out there doing the show. And I'm like, if we don't put it out now, it'll be over by the time they get to see it. But we talk a lot about the Sweet 16. So we don't have to talk as much basketball on here. But Bama's playing BYU tonight. That starts the Sweet 16. Are you glad that it's like the first game out of the chute? And how do you feel about the Tide in Newark?
I like that Auburn's chasing. Last weekend it felt very like, okay, Auburn would punch their ticket to the next round. Then the pressure's on Alabama. Okay, can they respond? Because right now it's pretty evident. Get on Twitter. Alabama and Auburn fans are going at it as far as, who can make it further in this tournament. Because the second that the other one goes down, granted, if the other team, like if Alabama were to lose tonight and then Auburn lost tomorrow, I mean, it's the same difference. But if one of you makes the Elite Eight and the other one doesn't, I think the trash talk is going to be flowing pretty heavily in one direction. And I just last week it was very much like, okay, Auburn's already there. Now the pressure's on Bama to respond. Now it's kind of flipped the script where Alabama gets to kind of make their statement first between those two, see if they can't go ahead and punch their ticket, where Bama fans can kind of be pounding their chest a little bit, having some fun with it. And then it doesn't matter what happens with Auburn on Friday. At the very least, you've matched them, and you're going to be there too. So I just think that it's you got to see it one way for a weekend, and now we're kind of getting to see it the other way. And so I'm excited about that. I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah, we'll be talking about that tomorrow, obviously. And I will be on the next round tomorrow. So I'll be in studio, and Dunaway will be out in Newark. So hopefully we have a Bama win. Look, GSP Scott, I'm not even talking about your comment. I like your emoji, man. Look at that. Grateful Dead.
That's right up your alley. Dude, that is.
Did this guy make this for me? Pretty sweet.
That is. In fact, you might need to ask him to send that to you, because that's pretty. That's an awesome avatar. Well, I guess what you call it.
All right, thanks, Clint. Yeah, clean me up. Yeah, avatar, man. That's what I like that. But anyway, any final thoughts, Clint?
No. Just excited about the fact that they've already got to their first scrimmage. Guys, we're about to be done with March. I mean, so you've gone the entire month of January, the entire month of February, and almost the entire month of March. We're making our way through this offseason, man. And I'm hoping that the next 3 months happen just as fast as these past 3 months, and now we're gearing up for football season. But I also want to stop and enjoy the baseball season, enjoy what's happening with the basketball team right now. But obviously, me, from what I do and kind of my passion, it's always been football. So going to continue to lean into that. But dude, I appreciate everybody who jumps on here with us every day. We have a blast with it. The comments and everything, it means the world to us. And I mean, hopefully we're talking about Kalen DeBoer trying to win his 5th national championship at Alabama, like 10 or 11 years from now, when we're sitting on this channel doing the same thing we've been doing.
Yeah. Love that idea. Be great to win another title. We need a new statue outside. Saban's getting lonely over there on that side of the thing. Let's put a DeBoer out there. Make sure he's wearing, though, not a T-shirt on the statue, right?
No. If he wins a national title, you put him in the Walmart T-shirt. I don't care what. Let that man wear whatever he wants to. Winning titles, does not matter.
Doesn't matter. Look, if you guys want to, to make the watching a little bit more interesting tonight, 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000 plus a $10 casino chip when using the code Crimson at mybookie.ag. I'm taking Bama from here. I'm taking Bama. I want to see the Bama Duke matchup. And if Alabama beat Duke to go to the Final Four, that could arguably, I mean, they beat North Carolina to do it last year, right? No, they beat North Carolina to go to the Elite Eight and then beat Clemson to go to the Final Four. That was a huge win. But beating Duke and Carolina in the tournament is sweet, man. So that I want to see that matchup. I mean, Arizona could potentially ruin that too. And BYU, if Bama doesn't play the type of defense and rebound the ball like they need to. And we're like I said, Elephant in the Room with Coker. It'll be out on the channel soon, so we'll talk a lot of basketball there. But thank you guys for being here. CoverCrimson.com. Clint will be hanging out there. So just go from there where you're at right now. over there. And thank you guys. Let's get them tonight. Roll Tide.